I thought you were more a digital security and risk type of guy. And now you're telling me a little of the AI stuff.
Digital transformation impacts everything. And my job is to make things better. My goal in life is to help as people go through. The focus on security and compliance and operational delivery for that sector is because that was a big gap. I go to places where there are problems and concerns and I work to fix them and make them better. The conversations now are, how does FTC or FCC or FDIC or I don't know, FDA, all the F agencies use Copilot to make it better. Think about what the FDA does. Incredibly formulaic, incredibly consistent, so easy to automate the quality reviews and checks because they're not being creative, they're applying consistency. Computers are better at that. Release that workforce to evaluate more drugs, to evaluate more foods, to do more inspections. And so my goal at this point is everybody should experience it because I think it'll make that big a difference in their life. And Copilot is integrated in, it's not separate. Like that's the big difference. It's part of your workflow.
Welcome to the Best 88 podcast. In this episode, we talk with John Bergin, Director of Federal, Microsoft Digital Security and Risk at Microsoft. Here's what he had to say.
All right, let's talk about the task force. Let me see if I understand it. Let me see if I understand the task force idea. The basic idea is this. Look, Google and Microsoft and Amazon and who else?
IBM, Oracle.
I guess, the cloud, providers of this world have information that would help with cybersecurity, but they don't share it. If they share it, we'll all be more secure. Did I get it?
I think so, but if you let me take a step back and try to lay it out a little easier, all of us understand ATM networks and banking, and all of us understands that bank fraud, credit card fraud is a huge issue, right? That's why we went to chips. We've seen the progression of security measures for banking. And in that arena, there is a ton of shared information between the globally significant financial institutions, GSIFIs.
So Morgan Stanley shares information with Bank of America, and they all do something with that, and they benefit each other.
Correct. Because financial fraud, hurts everyone. It is the danger of the common fraud, right? So again, if financial fraud is a known bad thing, Bank of America can't fix it. Wells Fargo can't fix it. Deutsche Bank can't fix it. But working together, they can reduce it. The concept of operations here is very similar, which is just as the financial clearinghouses talk about how much money they move through, right? We talk about over $10,000 in cash transactions we report because it could be money laundering, all those kind of things. And everybody gets big brothers watching them. Well, the reality is it worked. So when we look at those financial transactions and the data flows that they did, they were implemented in such a way that Interpol and the US government and the right law enforcement agencies had access to it. And the right banking institutions had access to it, that they could say, hey, that's a fraudulent customer. I'm going to hold him accountable or her accountable. I'm going to look at these transactions or flows to this account. So that worked. So the question here, the concept of operations here is, what do we do to mimic that financial clearinghouse data flow, which is, in that case, often about individuals, but very much about like large-scale data flows? How do we share some level of high-level awareness where it's not about Ezekiel or John, it's about data traffic to specific sites or whatever that looks anomalous or is an indication of compromise? How do we take that secret, specialized knowledge that Mandiant may have that is from the overall view of the dark fiber that Google owns, right, and share that out in a way that is it's challenging here because the cyber companies compete on, I have better intel than you do, but the banks competed too. And we have to remember, if we go back in time to the early days, there was a competition of like, my fraud protection is better than yours because we didn't recognize it as a common evil. And I think the conversation we're trying to have is, how do we get to recognize this as a common evil? How do we respect privacy? How do we hold customer privacy as paramount and still get that global data flow visibility that only the large scale service providers have shared?
I think there's a big one. Correct me if I'm not reasoning well, but isn't the fact that also, look, this is the United States. We're trying to protect ourselves even from external cyber attacks. Am I wrong? Am I getting this thing right? Wouldn't this initiative be important at the, I wouldn't say almost existential, but maybe I'm exaggerating, but wouldn't be the case that Google and Amazon and Microsoft will be helping everybody, the whole country, or a cyber attack can be devastating. Maybe I imagine, but am I wrong?
So let's take a step back and we'll make sure we understand Colonial Pipeline, right? Critical infrastructure, ransomware to major hospitals. We can list on and on all of the events that happened, whether it's from a malicious state or a malicious threat actor who is not a state actor. The threats are real. So what we have to recognize is just like banking fraud is real, and we all are like, oh yeah, who was the show where the guy made the fraudulent checks? If you remember, it was Tom Hanks or somebody's the. Anyway, I'll find the clip that just as we know that people do check fraud and social security fraud and all those kinds of fraud, like finance fraud is a real thing. Nobody questions it. But cyber fraud, you're like, oh, those banks didn't do whatever, or, oh, Colonial Pipeline didn't do whatever, or, oh, it's their fault. Oh, it's their fault. It's a very interesting victim-focused outcome with very little proactive engagement and involvement. And I think that's where this gets super interesting is if we can bring data together, we can detect earlier, we can detect more effectively. So small businesses can start to play with this data feed, get better awareness, start to bring better alerts. And you can open up the pool of people who are smart and thoughtful and are applying AI and other tools in different ways to the data set because it'll be available. Now,
please, who's going to be protected because of this? Everybody?
So I would say everybody but Iran, China, and Russia.
Gotcha.
North Korea. So those four countries we're not going to protect.
No, but
because their IP space, and I want to be careful why, because those IP spaces are outside of the scope of general discovery and use. So if you talk about these big companies, they're not there.
But it was only the United States that the task force was talking about.
So that task force is targeted towards American regulators and policymakers because they have major risk, because they've had major incidents, because if America moves in this direction 1 or 2 steps, Europe will move in it 4 steps because we live in America and many of us know some of those policymakers and they had ears that were open to hear the message. But it's really going to be interesting because if America takes 2 steps towards this, Europe will rush ahead of us.
Okay.
I think Africa is critical in this discussion.
But Europe didn't do this yet.
They have not done this, correct.
Okay, so America, we're going to be the first ones.
Well, I mean, just because we wrote a white paper, we think it's a snazzy idea, doesn't mean anybody's going to do anything with it. But it takes the zero trust implementation discussions and guidelines that we were talking about previously. It takes zero trust and adds the layer on top to start to, hey, bad identity detections. Hey, somebody's trying to do, pick an attack vector. And many of those will trigger large scale signals. And you'll say, oh, look, APT 38 is using this approach. And again, the clarity we have to have here is we've got to be thoughtful. We have to have engagement from industry, and we have to ensure that customer privacy is protected. And I think that's going to be the most challenging part of it. So Google, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, Meta, all use different tools, different sensors, but much of the data we collect is the same. Where we store it, how we store it is different. So the first 6 months of the proposal is have teams meet and start talking about what data they can share. The next 6 months is, okay, let's take 3 of the top 5. How do I start to get them aligned so that an apple is an apple and a cow is a cow? And then the next 6 months is what are we learning from this and what are we getting from it? How is machine learning helping us? And where and how are we going to act? Now, the reality is, and this is really what I think is important, if you can get the right people in the room from these companies with the right authority to share data for a conversation, I think my hypothesis is, and a number of my peers, that there's some aha moments that will come out of this. And again, fed by improved identity and conditional access rules that we've put in place as part of the zero trust migration, we're going to have more data. We have more sensors. We can see more. Now the question is, well, if you see it, what should we do? I believe that there will be some very quick aha moments that force a meeting of a different group of people that say, how do we react to pick a threat actor, what they're doing, Volt Typhoon. How do we react to Volt Typhoon trying to live off the land in critical infrastructure? We see them. What do we do? And that's where it gets really cool. So the argument we're making is we should share. We should take the banking example and grow it and recognize that competition is not always a perfect solution. And since none of us have perfect information, the best we can do to get to parity with the adversary is to share at some appropriate level, which is equal. It's going to be so hard to determine, but we've got to get there.
So you think it's going to take a few years for this to actually happen? And
the plan is a few years. I think it's going to take 5 months because I think within 5 months, everybody's going to have enough like, oh man, close that door. Oh, send the fire department.
what is the most transactional, basic motivation for an individual company to do this? For, let's say, one of the providers, immediate benefit. I know, I understand the long-term benefit.
Yeah, immediate benefit. Well, the most immediate benefit would be access to market. You can't sell to American consumers, right? It's an FTC ruling. You can't sell to American consumers if you don't participate this once you cross a certain threshold. Right, access to the American market. There's your easiest, like, hey, why does this matter?
Gotcha.
You can't sell to Americans. Why does it matter? A step back. Reputational. My peers are doing it and I'm not. Peer pressure is a great thing when used for good. And three, and this is going to sound hokey to folks who are not inside these big CSPs. There is not a security professional that I work with here at the company, or quite frankly, any leader I've had interaction with who is not motivated by doing the right thing.
Oh, yeah, no, of course.
Like the beauty of the engineers and the engineering culture that Google, Microsoft, Facebook all have is doing the right thing just makes sense. It's a good thing to do. And there is a genuine sense of serving the public good. And it's a lame answer, but it's probably the biggest motivation is that all these companies want to do the right thing.
So let me ask you this. Who is participating on the task force? What companies are there? What companies are not? Just out of curiosity.
So we've had engagement from Microsoft, Google, Cisco, IBM, Oracle. AWS is coming to the next discussion and working group. From the Defense Department, we've had representatives from all of the services and the Office of the Secretary of Defense CIO shop.
Wow.
We've had representatives from DHS. We've had representatives from, I want to say even Patent and Trademark showed up because maybe the guy just had a slow day. But what we're doing is having these great working sessions. We've had interest from the House Armed Services Committee, the right Hill folks, if you will, right? The right legislative support people. And the MITRE team has done an exceptional job of advocacy and communication. Because remember, like, while we might have had this wonderful little white paper we wrote up on the weekend, and the reality is we're being responsive to questions the Hill has asked about what we do to respond to Colonial Pipeline. And when they say we, they don't mean Microsoft, they don't mean Google, they don't mean Oracle, they mean we, America. What do we, the people, do to make this better? So we, the people, have to come together in certain fashions. And it'll be interesting. I do think there will be required regulatory sticks, right? I'm a big fan of access to market requires access to data, but that's a perspective and an approach. And I don't know that I'll be the one that wins there, but I would push hard for that because it just forces adoption. And I think this is an imperative need, just as addressing bank fraud was an imperative need. And again, I draw the analogies because money is pervasive in every aspect of our society. Technology is more pervasive than money. And that's where it gets really interesting.
I love it. I love it. Hey, and lastly, let's talk about Microsoft, your engagement there with different agencies, if you can, whatever you can share. What are your goals? What are your plans?
I think the discussion there is pretty straightforward. Right now, everything you hear from Microsoft would be about Copilot, right? I work in Teams engineering. I think Copilot is one of the most amazing tools. So look, when I was in the Defense Department, I wrote policies and I did all formulaic. So much, this is the standard. This is what it has to be. I can now go to Copilot, type something in, and it will give me an 80% document on almost anything I want. If I want to evaluate changes from the National Defense Act 1 year to the next year, I can ask Copilot to do the evaluation. It'll give me a summary. When we have a meeting, I can ask it to give me meeting notes and action items. We talked a little bit about why we do things. I happen to be a member of our Little League board, right? I brought Copilot to the meeting. I put a little speaker out. There were 12 people, 12 board members. All of them spoke. Copilot captured everybody's action, got 2 names wrong in a 3-hour meeting, and nobody had their own microphone. It was from a shared environment. And I can't tell you how much more impressive it continues to get as we go forward.
Wow.
So what do I talk about, right? I talk about why Copilot adds value to every employee, every worker, every opportunity, because everybody goes to meetings and nobody takes notes. Because everybody goes to meetings and they don't have follow-up action items. Because Microsoft has put in the task system and other tools to help you with that productivity, but it was never easy or automatic. You had to do it. You had to sign a task to John Bergin.
Oh, yeah.
By date. Now,
to decide the next action, you have to think.
But now Copilot will help you stay clean and organized and structured. I use it every day for little things like I write an email and I used to ask a friend, hey, could you look at this email and check for tone?
Right.
Because I come across as very staccato. Like I love bulleted lists. I love prioritized order, like boom, 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 and I'm out. I want a short conversation with as few words as possible, but that doesn't always work for the audience I'm going to. So I can highlight the text and say, hey, change the tone to be friendly, change the tone to informal, change the tone to formal. And it doesn't change the content, it changes the structure. So I can write faster and less well and get suggestions on how to make it better for my audience.
But do you have
Every government employee has that.
have the system, let's say, integrated to, how do you integrate it?
It's part of email. You open up email, you highlight it, it's a button in the email, and it's a button on your keyboard with the new Copilot laptops. Like it sounds so whiz bang fancy. It's like I'm selling you sliced bread. I'm telling you what I do in my daily life as an employee who uses the software. And yes, I get it a couple months before we put it out. We always test our stuff. It makes that big of a difference. And knowing how government employees have to work, I see the value for 80% of them day one.
But I thought you were more a digital security and risk type of guy. And now you're telling me a little of the AI stuff.
Digital transformation impacts everything. And that's kind of what I've always, right. My job is to make things better. If you remember the BASF commercial, we don't make the things you buy, we make the things you buy better. My goal in life is to be like that, to help as people go through. The focus on security and compliance and operational delivery for that sector is because that was a big gap. And Ezekiel, they said, hey, John, I got a problem. Can you go fix the problem? And I said, absolutely, because that's what I do. I go to places where there are problems and concerns, and I work to fix them and make them better. The conversations now are, how does FTC or FCC or FDIC or, I don't know, FDA, all the F agencies use Copilot to make it better? Think about what the FDA does. Incredibly formulaic, incredibly consistent, so easy to automate the quality reviews and checks because they're not being creative, they're applying consistency. Computers are better at that. Release that workforce to evaluate more drugs, to evaluate more foods, to do more inspections. So we talked about taking meeting notes as we were, business people, we're in meetings, we got to take notes. I'm an FDA inspector and I'm at the Boar's Head plant and I'm noting all the things and I just have a Teams meeting open and it's just recording it from my Bluetooth.
Wow.
All of that, boom, 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 here's the notes. Hey, send out the tasks. All the tasks go out. All the notices go out. And it's all documented. It's recorded for an artifact, so it's discoverable in case of legal proceedings. It's sending out tasks and notices and events for work to get done. And it's not if you remember the naturally speaking programs from the old days, it's not, here's a prompt like in your car, please play Bluetooth audio, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just talking and it's capturing it. And it is one of those things that it's hard to explain until you experience it. And so my goal at this point is everybody should experience it because I think it'll make that big a difference in their life. And Copilot is integrated in, it's not separate. Like that's the big difference. It's part of your workflow.
Gotcha. Hey, so you mentioned FDA. I thought you were a little bit more, so you cover all the agencies in this country for Microsoft?
So right now I cover all the federal and defense and whatnot. I cover everybody that's necessary, defense industrial based people. But yes, the civilian agencies, I think like Department of Energy has some interesting programs. There's a lot more going on in civilian agencies than are generically on their business card.
Interesting. So you're covering, I thought you were more of a DoD type of guy, given your past with the Fed, with the federal world. But for Microsoft, you cover everything.
Anybody who needs help. It's because this is the beauty of it. Working in a federally regulated environment is a federally regulated environment. I've got to pay attention to laws, regulation, and policies. I've got to apply them in the same fashion. I've got the same writing guidelines. That's why when we have these conversations and collaboration rules, they're all pretty standard. And they're all from the National Institute of Science and Technology on the security side. It's a beautiful thing because the skill set you have from the Defense Department is applicable at the Department of Homeland Security, is applicable at the FDA. And so when customers have questions, yes, I like anybody who needs help, we're here to help them. And in many of those cases, I get the opportunity to be part of that journey with them.
I love it. Well, John, thank you much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and thanks to John. Goodbye.